Hello, it's Pete here again, and today we're not talking about die cutting, we are talking about shrink plastic. But we're talking about printable shrink plastic. Now, if you think shrink plastic is all about kids colouring things in and shrinking it down and it's a bit of fun, then think again. We're about to blow your mind. So let's get going. So this is Sizzix printable shrink plastic, and this really is a game changer. You're getting 10 sheets, it's great value for money. As well as the printable, by the way, we do clear, we do white, we do black, and we do some of the most gorgeous glitter in silver, gold, and rose gold, which you will be seeing in an upcoming video, probably towards Christmas. But it's printable today. I'm going to show you some of the things you can do with this. I'm sure you will have a lot of ideas of your own, but first of all, let's talk about shrink plastic. How does it work? And I'm going to bring in a wonderful little kit. Now, this is my shrink plastic accessory kit. And if you didn't think you needed one of these, trust me, I'm about to change your mind, because one of the things about shrink plastic is when you heat it, it starts to curl in on itself and it will stick together. And sometimes it's difficult to flatten out afterwards and you don't get a nice finish. What I'm going to do, I'm going to use, this is my kit. So I have the mesh tool, I have this, which the name escapes me. I call it my stomper tool. But basically, well, you'll see what it's for in a minute. It's a silicone tool. These are all silicone. So that means that the shrink plastic won't stick to them. Now, I put the mesh on top. This is a die cut flower, incidentally, with some white shrink plastic. Now, if I take my tool, and this is the Sizzix heat tool, it's dual speed, so it's perfect. If you've got very delicate watercolors that you want to dry, it's fine. If you want to use embossing powders or shrink plastic, we have the higher heat setting. That's what it's all about. So versatility, my friends, and it's pretty cool to look at as well. Now, I'll switch that on. We're on the high heat setting. And when I move over the top of the shrink plastic, you'll notice that I keep the heat moving. Okay, I don't concentrate in one part, because what will happen then is it will shrink at different rates and that may cause distortion. So we'll just keep the heat moving over the top and you'll see now it's starting to shrink. Now, if I didn't have this mesh, that would all stick to each other. It would curl up like a dead spider. But there we are. I can flip that over. Just even out any little bubbles. You see it starts to flatten out. Now, if I want to get this perfectly flat, I simply take, it's called a press tool. I've just remembered what it's called. It's a press tool, not a stomper tool. There we are. So I hold that and now I can lift that up and there we are. Really cute. Now, say I wanted to link these together, make a piece of jewelry. Before shrinking this, I can pop a hole in either side and we can use jump rings to link those. It could be a bracelet, it could be a ring, it could be a piece of jewelry, but we're going to talk about that another time. But that essentially is shrink plastic, and that is why this wonderful kit is worth its weight in gold. It really is a game changer. Now, let's take this out of the way for a second, because I want to show you some of the things that we've done with shrink plastic. You won't believe, because printable, I mean, when I started to use it myself, the ideas just kept coming, and that's not down to me, it's down to the shrink plastic. It's really fantastic. Now let's talk about downloadables, free downloadables, for example. Vintage free downloadables. So let's take a look. Now this, you'll see it has Shrinkadelic Chic, and it even has a website. That is completely made up, my friends. But if you're one of the Etsy generation, or if you go to craft fairs, you know, and you make to sell, which we are happy for you to do so, then you can create something like that. Or how about this? A couple of earrings. And these are all free downloadables. Now, how about this one? Some gorgeous florals. This, actually, you can see it's smoky around the edge. So we use distress inks to give that smoky feeling, and we use the stamp for the text. So both the distress ink and the stamped image and the printed image all shrink down at the same rate, which is quite phenomenal. So think of this printable shrink plastic as you would paper. You can do all the same things. Now you'll notice on the top as well, I put a resin glaze, whether you use crackle accents or glossy accents or an epoxy resin, it's entirely up to you, but it gives a lovely domed effect. Now, that's a brooch. These are lovely cufflinks you'll see on the back there. How about this one? This is another free downloadable with some stamping. And when we look at these, and that's kind of a steampunk aesthetic, but check this out. This is a charm bracelet, all made with shrink plastic, all steampunk kind of findings, all printable, and you could get that out of a single sheet of shrink plastic. Now, this one I particularly like. I may be biased, but that is actually my grandfather and grandmother. So it's a wonderful way of creating bespoke gifts. Gifts that are meant specifically for the person receiving them. But the thing is, it's not kids' craft, is it? It's not just colouring in. This is professional. This is really cool. It's something that you would actually wear. Now, let's have a look at some of our vintage downloadables again. Here's a couple of rings. I can't actually get these on my ring finger. I've got sausage fingers. Anyway, but you know what? How about these now? This is my wife and daughter. These are my two sons. We've got the word mum written in there. A wonderful key ring as a gift as well. Now, say it's the end of term and you want to give a gift to your teacher. Well, you buy them a little box of chocolates, but how about giving them something like this, which has been written onto a piece of lined paper by a child with a little drawing underneath, world's best teacher. What a wonderful gift to receive, because you usually see them walking home at the end of a long school year with a box full of mugs and chocolates. But to have something like that, wow. Hey, how about Father's Day? Super Dad. How about this? Free downloadable artwork. This is vintage downloadables, kind of 1950s vibe going on there. Something like that. Now, let's talk about, I told you this was good, didn't I? Let's talk about your favorite bands, your favorite album covers. How about that? Download them, print them off, cut them to size. Wow, they make wonderful pin badges. You could turn them into key rings, whatever you want. Obviously, things like this, it's fine for personal use. You cannot sell things like this because they are copyrighted images. But you know what? Dingbat fonts. If you don't know what a dingbat font is, then go and Google it, because these are free downloadable fonts and they've been coloured with coloured pencils. Regular, everyday, bog standard, common or garden coloured pencils, but to stunning effect. And we've used crackle accents on the top of that. And again, more dingbat fonts, again, with coloured pencils and crackle accents. How about your favorite books? These are classics, of course. It's a classic imagery, it really is. I've even got one of these actually as my keychain at home. So just a couple more things. Mr. and Mrs. Hughes, my wife and I, what a wonderful gift for a wedding, for the groom to wear. Or the bride. Hey, it's 21st century, what the heck? Cards. Now, how about making them for card fronts? These wonderful vintages. And again, we've done the same thing. We've used the distress inks. We've used some stamps. Got some gorgeous florals there. Patterns. We're going to be talking about patterns in a second, because these are kind of got a very retro modern kind of feel, almost a mid-century modern. This one is my daughter, and I actually created these on screen using simple software. And we just set them in squares, cut them down to size, and we've made those wonderful tiles. And then finally, something like this. Now, oh, here's one more. This was drawn by a child, then it was coloured, then it was shrunk down, and then it was put onto a ring. Just imagine. So at the start I said, it's not about kids colouring in, but it can be. It can be whatever you want it to be. It's a wonderful rainy day activity, and it's a wonderful opportunity to get your children or grandchildren, nieces and nephews involved in the world of crafts. Now let's pop these to one side, because I want to talk about jewellery. But before we do, I want to show you some of the things that you can do with printable shrink plastic. Now, how about that? That's my doggy. That's an album cover. These are free downloadables. There you go, there's a lovely Pantone chip there. There's a book. There's some steampunk. This is a dingbat font. That's a child's drawing. So whatever you can think of, you can print. Just think of it like paper. These were the original size for those keychains that we did. World's Best Teacher, Love You Mum. Again, World's Best Teacher. So you can print them as many times as you like on one sheet. Now, we talked about child's art and we talked about dingbat fonts. These are fonts which you can download for free. You can print them off and make the most stunning pieces of jewelry or add them to cards, whatever your little heart desires. Let's go to the next one. Oh, vintage downloadables. Again, these are free to download. If you do a quick search on Google, you will find sites which have things like this, which you can just download. And this shrinks down. Oh, incidentally, they shrink down about 45%. Now, how do I know that? Well, here's how. This is my steel ruler. So imagine I scan this in and print it onto shrink plastic and then shrink it down. I get a version of that and it shows me exactly. So if I have something which measures 10 centimeters, I know that it's going to be this big when it's shrunk. So 45%. Also, all right, again, steampunk downloadables. This is the sheet that I used to make that lovely charm bracelet. Again, we have these iconic images. Some of my favorite albums there, maybe some of yours, who knows? Remember the florals? That's it, that's where they started. And they shrank down. So those lovely little earrings I did, I just cut them with a pair of scissors. I didn't use anything fancy. You can die cut this as well, as we're about to see. Now, I want to talk about patterns. Let's get into patterns. So, how about that? Now these, again, free downloadable patterns. You can flood this sheet with one single pattern. These were used for a very specific purpose, which I shall show you a little later. But I want to show you how to create now some lovely jewelry just from half a piece of shrink plastic. And if you make to sell, if that's your thing, then imagine the value you're going to get out of a single sheet. And the results are really professional as well. So let's just put these to one side. Now this is a pattern which I've printed onto the shrink plastic. You can see I've printed it onto the matte side for this. Usually it doesn't really matter. You're still going to get great results, which either way. But for the purposes of this demo, I've printed onto the matte side, and this is the gloss side facing upwards. And what I've done, I've cut half of that. So a good thing to bear in mind as well is when you print off, the colors will intensify as it shrinks down. So that's a good thing to bear in mind. Now, I've taken this square and I've cut it into 3 pieces. Let me take this strip, and I'm using this corner punch now, and I'm just going to round off the corners. It cuts beautifully with scissors, with a craft knife, also with dies as well. So there we are. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to do the same with this one. And believe it or not, we're going to make 3 wonderful pieces of jewelry with that. Now, next, because this is actually going to be a pendant, a necklace. So what we need to do is pop a hole in that prior to shrinking. That's very important, because once it's shrunk down, it gets much thicker, it becomes very rigid, and then it becomes impossible for you to shrink it down. So I'll pop that on there, take my circle. Now, because shrink plastic is more brittle than paper, I wouldn't use very, very complex dies because they will curl up and die. So we want to go with simpler shapes. Some of the flower that you saw earlier, that die cuts absolutely beautifully, not a problem at all. So what I've done there is I've cut 2 circles, and we'll pop that to one side. And again, these are going to be my earrings. Now, let's pop a hole in that one and that one. Again, remembering to make the hole prior to shrinking. Now, there's my earrings. There's my pendant. And this mystery piece, I'm going to do this first, actually. Now, rather than bring out my silicone mat, which I used earlier, I'm going to use my Sizzix Maker's mat, which is a wonderful piece of kit. It's also silicone, but I'm using it because it shows up better on camera. That's the only reason. So I'm going to place that down. And to one side, I've got my brayer. And you think, Pete, why have you got your brayer? Well, actually, it's not about the brayer itself. It's this piece that I want. And I'm just going to pop it to one side. Now, let's put that over the top and start to shrink. Okay, so I'm going to keep this moving as I did before. Keep it moving across the length of the plastic. Right, and eventually this is going to start to shrink, but not immediately, and that's why you need to keep the heat, you need to keep it moving. That's very, very important. A lot of people, the first time they encounter shrink plastic, or they have problems with it. But if you follow a few simple tips, it'll never go wrong again. There you go. So it's starting to shrink, it's starting to curl up again. The mesh is doing its job. It's keeping it in place. And then from here, I'm going to take that, I'm going to turn it over. And just any little bubbles are going to be evened out. Now, this time, I take my brayer, I'm going to roll this around, okay? And the reason I use that brayer is because it's roughly the same thickness as my ring finger. So this is going to be a ring. And then when I take that off there, I can simply slip it on my finger. And this is why I use the matte side, because the gloss acts like a kind of a window going through to the color. Now you can find something that fits your ring finger, or you can get one of those ring gauges as well. But let's take a few others. Remember that those patterns that I showed you earlier, they were all created to make different rings. Really, really cool. There you go. I don't think I'm going to get a job on jewelry TV modeling rings somehow, but hey, you get the idea. So let's take those off. Now, so we've made a ring. We made a gorgeous ring, okay. The two circles become these earrings. And this is the pendant. And you know what? If you wanted to make something like a bracelet as well, this was just rectangles which were cut. I haven't actually finished this off, but you get the idea. That's the vibe we're going for. So this is really funky sort of boho jewelry. I could see this on a craft store. If you were making to sell, particularly when it's done as a set, I think it's absolutely fantastic, stunning. And there you go. So there you have it, printable shrink plastic. Remember, you're getting 10 sheets in a pack. Do look out for other videos on shrink plastic, because this is kind of the tip of the iceberg, but the printable is so cool because it's so personal in nature what you create. You know, I've given you some ideas. I'm sure you have a lot of your own. I know when we did a show recently, people were saying, oh, you could do this, oh, you could do that, oh, you could do the other. Remember, you can use your inks on printable shrink plastic. You can color with colored pencils. You can use alcohol inks, which is stunning when they're shrunk down to shape. But you can download pretty much anything. You can print your own sentiments. It's never ending. Didn't I tell you it was worth sticking around for? Didn't I tell you? Printable shrink plastic from Sizzix. Thank you very much for joining me today. I've been Pete, and I'll see you again soon.